The choice to abandon one's home is painfully difficult, but it's one that growing numbers face as extreme weather renders entire regions unlivable. Most migrants head to cities already buckling under the strain of exponential growth. On Eco India today, we look at ways to ease the pressure. Hello and welcome, I'm Sanuta Raghu. Over the next 3 decades, the UN predicts that some 200 million people will be uprooted by climate disasters. As the planet gets hotter, South Asia is particularly vulnerable. The challenges are evident in the Himalayas, where hundreds of villages already lie deserted. Our reporter visited one to get a very personal view of the factors driving climate migration.
It looks like these people have just left. The paint is fresh. It's really spooky. We normally think of rising seas or disastrous hurricanes when we talk of climate change. But here, in this Himalayan village, something's happening, and the impact of this could be significantly greater than any natural disaster. This is one of over 1,000 ghost villages in Uttarakhand state in northern India. It may look green and luscious, but life here has become almost impossible.
We wouldn't leave if it was possible for us and our children to survive in our village. But there's nothing at all here.
Uttarakhand is one example. New projections say that in just 50 years, 1 in every 3 people on Earth could need to move house, as climate change becomes an increasingly significant factor. This is Rajendra Bisht, who used to live in this village of People Koti. But his family home, of course, didn't always look like this.
When I see this today, I feel like crying.
When you were here, were you happy?
Very happy. I will never get those days back. It was relaxing living here. The cool breeze. We left because there was no employment. And also, here, agriculture, the main occupation, is dependent on rains. Look at this now, overgrown grassland. We used to once be able to grow so many crops here.
Apart from an unemployment crisis here in the hills, the change in the monsoon is playing an increasingly important role in people's lives here. According to reports, 20 years ago, the rainy season used to be 60 days long, and now it only rains around 50. Which means that sometimes it rains less and crops that are grown here, like wheat and maize, can dry out. And when it does rain, it pours more intensely over a shorter period, so fields can get flooded. The intense rain is now called cloudbursts, which have not only led to farms being washed out, but also homes and neighborhoods. Just last year, more than 50 people were killed in landslide-related accidents in this state of Uttarakhand. So people like Rajendra are moving in search of a better life and can be categorized as climate migrants, although
it's a difficult thing to define who's a climate migrant and who's an economic migrant, because sometimes the lines are quite blurry. Whenever there's a big event, like a big hurricane, we might say, okay, these are climate migrants because their homes have been destroyed and people are leaving as a result of that. But most of the time, it's not as clear-cut as this. There might be a drought that's been ongoing for many, many years that restricts people's economic livelihoods, and then these people start to migrate.
The latest estimate published by the World Bank says that in just South Asia, Africa, and Latin America, 140 million people could migrate internally by 2050. One international study even predicts that globally by 2070, 1 in 3 people could potentially be displaced by climate-induced changes. Hotspots include densely populated places like Indonesia and Bangladesh. But it is affecting the global north too. 60% of the Netherlands could be flooded if its artificial defenses are overwhelmed. And in the US, wildfires and other disasters are already rendering over 1 million people homeless each year. Heat is another big driver. At the moment, only around 1% of land is uninhabitable for humans. But as the planet heats up at the current rate, that figure could go up to 19% in just half a century. And this is having a big impact, especially on those that are forced to move.
यहाँ पे की तो लाइफ मैम अगर ये थोड़ा रोजगार हो
Life here, oh God, if you want to work and survive, there's so much tension and pressure with the competition. You need to run like a horse or donkey.
कि मतलब आपको जी दौड़ना है घोड़े की तरह या गधे की तरह दिन भर काम पे लगे
Time passes by so quick, and before you know it, you have grown old.
करते कुछ पता नहीं चलता है ये है यहाँ पे दिक्कत मैं यहाँ पे
I now work in construction and I oversee a site. It's an okay job, but even if it wasn't, I would have to do it to run the house and feed my family.
तो करना ही पड़ेगा
Rajendra lives in a poorer part of Ramnagar town, among other migrants from the mountains. It used to be a slum but has recently developed into concrete houses. Most migrants live in poorer conditions, at least when they first move. And these conditions make them vulnerable and potential migrants once again. Comparatively, Indian slum dwellers can experience heat up to 6 degrees warmer than housing societies nearby. And in towns like this, flash floods and landslides are more likely to affect homes constructed haphazardly on floodplains. So what can be done? While migration remains high in Uttarakhand, the neighboring state of Himachal Pradesh has come up with some solutions that can work. Farmers have begun developing diverse agricultural practices to bring in revenue and adapt to the changing climate going forward. The state has also promoted sustainable tourism to ensure that local people can earn a living and stay behind. Globally, governments are trying to lessen the immediate impact of climate change to keep people out of danger. For example, on the island of Fiji, the government relocated people to higher ground in a flood-prone area. The Indonesian government has been building sea walls to keep the water out. Apart from making people stay, governments need to be prepared for mitigating conflict and scarcity as people move internally and internationally. But it can't be only up to the most affected countries to finance adaptation to the changes. Do you want to come back?
बिल्कुल मैम मेरा बहुत दिल कर
Absolutely, that's what I really want, to come back here and live. I can't yet, but one day, I hope I can return and stay in my village.
और रहूं यहाँ गांव में अपने
But people will still migrate, for whatever reason. That needs to be acknowledged, and pathways for the move and integration need to be made a priority.
Well, as we just saw, people searching for secure homes and livelihoods often end up in city slums. There, opportunities are limited by a lack of access to basic services, including something as simple as a postal address. An architect here in India has devised a system that uses digital technology to put people on the map.
Kolhapur in western India, home to nearly 4 million people. Like in most Indian cities, many inhabitants live in slums, haphazard settlements usually excluded from urban planning policies and difficult to navigate. Until recently, finding an exact location was impossible. Over 1,700 families live here. It's a legal settlement, but no one has an individual address. Today, however, this pizza delivery is being made right up to a doorstep. And it's thanks to this unique number, a Google Plus code based on the latitudinal and longitudinal location of a place. It's a blessing for Bhagyashri Kalyankar. She runs an electronics store next door and often needs to order supplies online. She now uses a Plus code as an address on Google Maps and says the material is delivered right to her home.
This is the code I've been given for the accurate location. Earlier, if someone wanted to come and deliver to our house, or if a relative was visiting, he had to call us, and we had to guide him on the phone, using landmarks like rickshaw stands or nearby shops. We had to sometimes go and pick him up. Now I have none of those hassles.
The Plus codes are the work of Pratima Joshi and her team. The architect and founder of the non-governmental organization Shelter Associates has been using data to improve conditions in shantytowns. They work across 7 cities in the state of Maharashtra. The digital address is their most recent initiative, for which they've partnered with Google. They put up the slum map on a board just outside the settlement.
For every house, now you see there's a location address that we have put out. It's going to be a game changer because now there will be an address for every house, which is never the case in a slum. You want to get an ambulance, there's an emergency, there's a fire outbreak, anything. You can leverage plus codes and make sure that you get that service at your doorstep.
Pratima's team have mapped and marked this whole slum, the largest in the city of Kolhapur. But not everyone understands the initiative. This man says he has no idea what the board with the number is meant for. He doesn't own a smartphone and has never heard of Google. That's the reason Pratima's team conduct regular information sessions, explaining what plus codes are and what they can be used for. For example, getting their cooking gas cylinders delivered to their doorsteps every month.
Your location destination la taka number.
The concept is still new, but many young residents here have smartphones and already use Google Maps. Individual addresses could help residents open bank accounts and access postal services more easily in the future. The technology may look simple, but creating the plus codes is far from easy. 230 kilometers away in the city of Pune, a team of data analysts work at the NGO's main office. They're specialized in using a geographic information system, so-called GIS mapping. Led by Pratima, they use satellite images as well as field mapping to generate as accurate a digital address as possible, a tricky task in a slum.
What you see is just the roof, right? You don't know what's happening under the roof. And you might think this is one house, and then when you go on the ground, you realize that, oh my God, there are actually 3 houses under that roof. So you cannot just use a satellite image for digitizing a slum. There is absolutely no substitute for field visits and field mapping.
The architect says the same method is also used to map infrastructure in the slums. From public toilets, manholes, drain networks, to water stand posts and garbage bins. All the data is on their website. The data has also allowed Pratima's team to make a big push into sanitation. In most slums, the only option for residents to relieve themselves are community toilets like these, which often lack running water, involve long waiting times, and pose health hazards because of unsanitary conditions. Pratima's focus is on individual toilets. In this settlement in Kolhapur, the team found through their mapping that there was a shortage of drain networks. The data pinpointed the exact location of a few existing lines that connected to the city's drain network, making it easier for municipal authorities to know where to lay the new sewage lines. That is essential for toilets to be built. The laying of drain networks has kicked off a toilet building spree, creating jobs for masons and labourers. The NGO provides the building material. Families who can afford it pay for the construction. Sarika Chopde recently got her own toilet built for the first time and says it's given her a feeling of safety and privacy.
I have a teenage daughter, and using the community toilet in the slum was dangerous, especially at night. Men used to hang around and harass us. With drains being laid, we decided to build a toilet in our own home.
Across Kolhapur, Pratima's team have facilitated the construction of close to 3,800 individual toilets to date. The mapping technology has gone a long way towards creating a safer and cleaner environment. For residents, it means having a more livable slum.
As India's cities grow, their mountains of garbage grow too. In Chandigarh, household waste segregation has been mandatory for several years. Now, the city has gone one step further. It started the door-to-door collection of sanitary waste, a measure that targets plastic pollution, as well as the taboos associated with menstruation.
For many in Chandigarh, collecting trash is the only way to earn money. It's informal work. Residents pay them a small amount. They separate the trash on the street. Santosh Tak has been doing this for 25 years. It has affected her health. Others have contracted hepatitis or tetanus.
Picking waste also causes itching and other diseases. the whole body starts itching. See my feet, my hands. They are infected as well.
She checks the rubbish for recyclables like plastic or metal, which can be sold. But mostly, it's just household waste, and that includes sanitary products.
It's usually open, not wrapped in anything. It has blood and filth over it. So we segregate it with our hands and keep wet waste on one side, dry on one side, and then sanitary and other waste on another side.
Sanitary waste is a huge problem here. Each month, more than 1 billion used sanitary pads are disposed of in India. They end up in landfills. In Chandigarh, that's changing. Households are now required to separate out used hygiene products. The move has been initiated by Chandigarh Municipal Corporation and has been a year in the making.
Basic concept that it is a taboo. So lots of citizens might not want to give the waste in a segregated fashion. They might just want to put it together with the wet waste, which we do not wish, because the wet waste goes into composting. Ideally, it should not go into the wet waste. That is where the idea came from.
A public awareness campaign addressed the topic of sanitary waste. Now, the local waste disposal service collects used hygiene products separately. Vinod Kumar is one of its 900 employees. They often have to explain what they are doing.
We distributed leaflets with all the information regarding separation. Separation of sanitary waste was a bit difficult, as women were initially shy. They used to get angry and ask, "Why you are asking this?" Then we explained how this waste goes for treatment and how separation is good for the city's cleanliness and environment.
Priya Bansal has been separating her waste for 2 months. The red bucket is for used sanitary products. Organic and household waste are also put in separate containers.
Sanitary pads and diapers are like plastic waste. It doesn't decompose. So now sanitary pads and diapers have their own bin. It is also easier for the collector to pick it up.
The sanitary waste is burned. The municipal government does this in cooperation with a private company. Burning is far from ideal, but environmentalists say dumping sanitary products in landfills is even worse.
90% of sanitary waste is made up of plastic, which means it will not degrade, and it continues to stay in the landfill. It will break down into smaller particles, typically, now known as microplastic, and it's going to stay in the environment for 700 to 800 years. Now, that's a long time if you consider that the plastic has chemicals in it.
India produces around 113,000 tons of sanitary waste every year. Currently, there is no viable alternative to burning it. Several startups are working to develop more sustainable disposal methods.
These new technologies which are coming up, which segregate or separate different layers of sanitary pads and then recover the plastic, recover the other materials like cellulose. In the long term, if these are effective and their emissions are checked, these would be a much better technology.
But there is some way to go before such technologies can be put into practice. Chandigarh is one of just a few cities in India with a waste separation program. It's been running for only a few months, but the impact is clear.
The first day we had collections of just 22 kilograms. Today we are at more than 500 kilograms. The figures themselves depict how the society and the city has reacted to the initiative.
Another boon is that the initiative is sweeping away some of the taboos associated with sanitary hygiene for young people, whilst raising climate awareness as well.
And staying on the topic of waste, the disposal of human waste is generally viewed as a public health burden. But researchers say it's an overlooked source of nutrients that could make a valuable contribution to our ecosystems. An initiative in Germany is looking to recycle it for use as a fertilizer.
Time for the morning trip to the toilet at this music festival in northern Germany. These toilets are collecting a valuable resource, fecal matter. Here it's not considered waste, rather a raw material. During the summer, sanitation startup Finizio has been sending the toilets from festival to festival. That explains the empty hall at the company's office in Eberswalde near Berlin, leaving CEO Florian Augustin with time to tinker.
The raw materials we're talking about are urine and, of course, feces that's collected here. Just enormous amounts of nutrients. It's good stuff that comes out of us. But we just flush it away and don't want to have anything to do with it. But it's something we really have to start dealing with again.
That's exactly the goal of the state-sponsored research project Cirkulierbar, which Finizio is also a part of. Ariane Krause coordinates the project to gather human waste from public toilets and turn it into a usable resource. Instead of flushing the waste with water, it's covered with pulverized straw.
I can do a demonstration, as if someone were peeing.
Inside the toilet, the urine runs into a separate container. That means the feces stays dry. Keeping them separate makes them easier to purify.
The point of the project is to collect human waste and to bring the nutrients in it onto the fields as fertilizer. There's huge recycling potential in human waste.
Cirkulierbar's research happens here on the edge of Eberswalde. This is where nutrients such as potassium, phosphorus, nitrogen, and many others that people excrete every day are being recycled, turning the plants that feed us back into fertilizer. The collected fecal matter is composted along with green waste and transformed into humus fertilizer for agricultural use.
Why do we want to recycle nutrients? If we look at minerals such as phosphorus or potassium, we typically get them from mines. And when it comes to phosphorus, resources are extremely scarce. Nitrogen is another nutrient that we really need to be recycling because it's an essential nutrient that every plant needs to grow.
And that would normally be extracted in an energy-intensive way. During composting, bacteria create heat.
So we're currently at 67 degrees. The goal is to reach 75 degrees, because that's when you have the greatest inactivation rate for pathogens.
Killing off the pathogens is key. That's just one of the things monitored by Claudia Kirstin's lab team at the Biomass Research Center in Leipzig.
Heavy metals should definitely not be present. We also check there's no mercury or lead or traces of medication or resistant germs. When all goes well, they're usually killed off during the purification process and the temperatures in the compost.
Regulations in Germany currently forbid the use of human waste in agricultural fertilizers. That's due to hygiene concerns.
We want to show that it's safe and that it's possible to eliminate pollutants and comply with all the limit values in line with the regulations. And to show that after the composting and purification processes, you can use this material as fertilizer on fields.
Following her initial analysis, Claudia Kirstin is optimistic. Cirkulierbar received special permission to use its fertilizer. Now the corn on the trial field is ready for harvesting, earlier than expected due to the drought. The soil mixed with the experimental fertilizer appears to have done a better job at supplying moisture to the corn than the untreated soil. Cirkulierbar plans to focus next on using urine as a resource, which right now still has to be disposed of in the sewage system.
That would actually be the perfect combination if we were able to bring all the nutrients we excrete together again in the form of agricultural fertilizer that's used to produce more food. This now has a good smell of soil. That means the composting has gone well. The material has turned back into soil.
The team is working on improving and automating urine composting in order to start processing larger amounts. Aliana Krause and Florian Augustin never lose sight of the big picture, to make their products so good and so clean that they'll be put to use on fields. And the festivals are providing more than enough raw material.
Well, what we take from the earth goes back to the earth. This is the norm and always will be. The more we align to make this process sustainable, the more we guarantee our long life as a species. Think about that, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye and thanks for watching.